Hi, I'm Stefan, Senior Solutions Architect from AWS.
Hi, I'm Mohanid, Senior Manager from Qualio, and this is my architecture.
Okay, Mohanid, it looks like an interesting architecture that you brought here today. I see one of our generative AI services, Bedrock, here that you use in your architecture. And please tell me, what kind of business problems are you trying to solve with this architecture and with generative AI?
Yeah, so in the life science industry, it's very documentation heavy.
Right.
So in order to kind of get approval to bring a product to market, you would have to have it supported by a lot of documentation. So within the generative AI, because of our application architecture for generative AI, we do have a unique opportunity where we have access to that content already, and we're able to use that content and support the quality professionals in creating documentation or change control or training assessments. So we have a number of different use cases that we've used with Bedrock.
Okay, so I see they're quality professionals and probably they're interacting with the Qualio UI, right? So how does it work?
Yeah, so we for our front end, we have a micro front end based architecture. So typically speaking, we break our micro front ends up into different modules.
Right.
So one of our first modules that we have here is the document module. So the document module is where users will store their policies, procedures, and work instructions.
Okay.
Additionally, another micro front end that we would have is called the training module.
Right.
So the training module then is used to train users and within the organization on the documentation that's being created.
I presume some of the core and backend services are relevant for storing the documents. How does that work?
Yeah, correct. So within the micro front-end architecture, as I said, a lot of them are backed by their own microservices, but these two services, these two micro front-ends are backed by our core application.
All right.
So our core application is built on ECS with RDS and a number of other services in the background. And additionally, we have, as I mentioned, we have other modules as well, which are backed by other ECS clusters or other Lambda functions or whichever may be.
Got it. So basically, they are responsible for storing, retrieving the documents over a RESTful API, and then you also persist the data in RDS, correct?
Yes, correct, yeah.
So now I want to learn, how are you leveraging generative AI for your application?
Yeah, so as I said, like we do have access to a lot of this content already. So what we've done is, rather than modify the existing ECS core application,
Right.
What we've done is we spun out a separate application which consists of a number of different Lambda functions, which are also backed by a REST API gateway. And then within the API gateway, then we have our UI that can use the content that's brought in from the service, and then we can fire this up to the API gateway and then have it generate a prompt based on the use case that we're trying to tackle at the time.
I see there are different Lambda functions potentially supporting different use cases, right? So what's CK Editor?
All right, so CK Editor is a third-party editor that we use. It's a WYSIWYG HTML-based editor.
Got it.
And we use that to allow customers to basically store their content, write their content, collaborate on content, comment, suggest, etc. So for the CK Editor service, which is hosted in the Documents micro frontend,
right,
we can then leverage Bedrock to be able to suggest improvements to the content.
Right.
So basically selecting a piece of text and saying, can you sharpen the writing? Can you improve the writing? Can you simplify the writing? Or can you make it more authoritative? So again, being able to support customers to write content that will then feed back up to the AI, and then they can accept, reject, or regenerate based on their own interpretation.
Got it. So you make the life of the quality professionals easier with the CK Editor integration. Then what about change control? What's that?
Yeah, so change control in the life science industry is a very important aspect. So anything that any piece of content or any asset that's in a QMS would need to be managed through a change control or a change control process. So essentially what that means is that if you change X to Y, you need to understand the reason why you're changing it, the reason for the change, or the impact of that change.
Yeah,
okay?
Definitely.
With the change control Lambda function, what we do is we generate a change control based on the content that we've pulled in from here. So for example, if we have document version 1, that's based on regulation from 2020, let's say 2021.
Yeah.
Now, a new regulations come out in 2024, so we need to create document version 1.1.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's going to be a diff between these two documents. As you know from using Microsoft Word, you can generate a diff. Right? So we can be able to see what's changed. So what we do is to support our quality professionals is we send the two versions of this document up to this Lambda function.
Yeah.
And we ask Claude to then generate a change control. So the reason for the change, the description of the change, and the impact of the change based on a specific change control template that we already have stored in our application up here. So there's 3 assets that are sent over to this Lambda function. There's the previous version of the document, there's the current version of the document, and also there's the change control template. So then Claude is able to generate a smart change control as well as the rationale for this change control. And then again, going back to what the customer can do, it's a suggestion that they can accept, reject, or regenerate it back to Claude.
Yeah, got it. I think it also saves them a lot of time, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because you know yourself, when you're writing documents for a couple of weeks, it's very hard to remember all the changes that you've made in a particular version. So it really kind of automates that for the user.
Cool. And then last but not least, there's training and assessment. So, and you also mentioned it earlier. So how does it fit into the bigger picture?
Yeah, so let's take this use case that we have here. So we have version 1, which is based on 2021 as a regulation. Then we have version 1, 1.1. We're going to make this effective, and it's now version 2.0, okay? So now version 2.0, I want to train my staff on version 2.0 of this regulation or this new policy that has been implemented. So how do we prove that that's been, or they've successfully read and understood the document that I've modified? So what we do here is that we send up the content up to the API gateway into our Lambda function training assessment. This will then ask Claude to generate a questionnaire, which is like a quiz type style, based on this document content. And it will then suggest some questions, some answers, 3 incorrect answers, 1 correct answer, and then the user can then accept, reject, or regenerate it based on their own interpretation there.
I like that a lot. And it's also a very diverse set of use cases that you implemented here with generative AI.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're going to probably expand a little bit more into it as well as we go forward.
So how was it for you to work with Bedrock and to build those 3 use cases?
It was a no-brainer. We spent a lot of time experimenting with different AIs, obviously ChatGPT being the famous one that was there. But really, when we integrated with our Lambda stack and our ECS stack directly into Bedrock, was a no-brainer for us. Because in the life science industry, it's highly regulated. We have to manage our suppliers effectively. So we have like an internal policy where it is, if AWS offers a service, let's experiment with them first.
Awesome.
And when we did experiment it, we ran our checks. Bedrock was definitely the winner for us there.
Yeah, Mohammed, thank you for sharing this super interesting and cool architecture with us today. And thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us.